Others and a vaccine milestone.
I would always remember today that it was on Mother's Day 2021 that I got my first Pfizer COVID vaccine shot.
A weekend made even more special as over 50% of adults in Toronto have now gotten at least a first dose of a COVID vaccine.
We're saying it's time to have the discussion.
And as Ontario ramps up its vaccine rollout, we'll show you the Ontario border town eager to open up to the U.S.
Happy to know a lot of people care about me.
There's always a family here from us.
And a community coming together for a Mississauga teen. His inspiring perseverance on his first Mother's Day after losing his mom to COVID.
This is CBC Late Night News.
Good evening, I'm Chris Glover. Not the emotional reunion hugs that many had hoped for this Mother's Day. Still, there is a feeling of optimism tonight as the mayor confirms more than half of people in Toronto, 18 and older, have now been vaccinated with at least one dose of a COVID vaccine. A musical boost there for those waiting in line at a pop-up vaccine clinic near Finch and Highway 400. This one was set up by the Jamaican Canadian Centre. To date, more than 1.3 million COVID-19 vaccine doses have been administered in Toronto. Mayor Tory posted a message today thanking those who have already rolled up their sleeves as he spoke about the road ahead.
Premier Ford has set a new target of 65% by the end of May. I'm always up, and so is Toronto, for a challenge like that. But you know, it's not about the challenge or a number. It's about saving lives, getting life back to normal. It's about hope. It's about summer. It's about jobs, family, good health.
While the city ramps up efforts to hit that target and get even more people vaccinated, many are still finding getting a vaccine in the GTA is a difficult task, and some medical experts are warning about barriers for some. We begin our COVID coverage tonight with Talia Ricci.
Lately, in parts of Ontario, finding an open vaccine spot is being compared to a scavenger hunt or getting into an underground club.
Yeah, I went yesterday and you kind of had to be in the know. We were pretty lucky to get in.
People 18 and over in designated hotspots are eligible for vaccination through mobile teams and pop-up clinics.
We're super excited. I mean, it's been a long time coming.
When those pop-ups have extra doses, it's being posted on social media, resulting in hundreds of people flocking to a location with scenes of people running to secure a spot in line. The province quietly announced Friday that all adults can book a COVID-19 vaccine at select Ontario hotspot pharmacies. No proof of address required. Today, Canada's public health minister emphasized that it's time for people to get in line.
That's why we keep saying, when it's your turn, please get vaccinated.
But for some, that's easier said than done.
Yesterday, waited in line for about 3.5 hours for me to be told that I needed an appointment.
It's great to see that vaccine confidence and people willing to drive all over the city. But, we really also need to ensure that we're getting the message out to people who need the vaccine most.
Dr. Andrew Buzari says he's happy to see a recent rise in vaccine access, but the messaging needs to be more streamlined.
We need a more comprehensive system approach because we're losing a lot of people who aren't on social media, who obviously have other barriers in their lives.
While many still wait for their turn, for some, this was a special day for more reasons than one.
Well, I would always remember today that it was on Mother's Day 2021 that I got my first Pfizer COVID vaccine shot.
The province says it's currently on track to administer first doses of the COVID-19 vaccine to 65% of adults by the end of May. That's also when vaccine deliveries are expected to ramp up and stay consistent throughout June. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
Now to growing calls from some officials this weekend for the Canada-U.S. border to reopen. The top member of the U.S. Senate, Chuck Schumer, says with more people vaccinated, it is time to loosen restrictions. And on the Canadian side, at least one local mayor in a border city agrees. But as Farah Morelli tells us, those calls come as Ontario's government continues to push for the exact opposite.
When COVID-19 hit, Niagara Falls became a shell of its former self. Bustling streets, now quiet because of the border closure. Today, the city's mayor says it's time to change that.
Our focus here is getting things open, getting everybody healthy, and getting the economy happening again, because in Niagara Falls, it's been devastating. We're saying it's time to have the discussion and let us know where the benchmarks are, how we get there.
The call to open also growing south of the border from the U.S.
We have to find a way to safely open up the border ASAP.
And yet, from some officials here in Ontario,
mutant COVID variants are flying into Canada from countries like the UK.
A polar opposite message. The Ontario PCs released this ad attacking the federal government for not further restricting travel into Canada.
Trudeau didn't close the borders when the pandemic started.
This weekend, Federal Minister Dominic LeBlanc wrote to Ontario's Solicitor General and Minister of Health, outlining what the feds have done to secure the borders, saying it's banned all non-essential travel into Canada and asked which international travelers Ontario would like them to ban. That letter was in response to 3 letters from the Ontario government calling for the mandatory hotel quarantine rules to apply to Canadians coming back here by land and for PCR testing to be brought in for domestic travel. Today, the Premier's office once again called on the federal government to do more, saying, quote, "We can't sit back here and watch the 4th wave of COVID-19 walk across our border."
You've got 2 politicians, they're out of tricks. So what they're going to do is they're going to snipe back and forth at each other.
Experts say it's all an exercise in political theater.
So what you've got here in sum is a couple of politicians, both of whom have actually fallen down on their jobs and are now kind of pointing at the other one saying, well, you need to do this better, and the other one saying you need to do that better.
While the posturing continues, don't expect things to change soon at the Canada-US land border. The closure is in effect until at least May 21st. Farah Morali, CBC News, Toronto.
A large group of people gathered in Waterloo today as part of an anti-lockdown rally. Kingston Frontenac Independent MPP Randy Hillier attended and spoke to the crowd, along with Trinity Bible Chapel pastor Jacob Riome. That church had its doors locked by a judge last weekend after being found in contempt of court for holding in-person church services above capacity limits. Waterloo Regional Police say they've been working in partnership with bylaw officers, but so far no charges have been laid. Ontario recorded just over 3,200 COVID cases today and registered a 3rd wave high of 47 deaths linked to the illness. But overall, the rate of new infections, hospitalizations, and ICU admissions all continue to slowly decline. Still, new survey data from Ontario nurses is showing the impact of the relentless fight on the front line. As Dahlia Ashry reports, many nurses say they're burnt out and demanding proper recognition.
That sense of impending doom, but almost hopelessness starts to set in.
Teresa Marini is an ICU nurse in southwestern Ontario every day and multiple times a day. For the past year, Marini gears up in her personal protective equipment to take on the day, and it hasn't been easy.
And see the sweat dripping off so you can't even see through your goggles because we're so plasticed in, and that's been a challenge.
And Marini isn't the only one struggling. She's part of a group of close to 5,000 nurses called Ontario Nurses Demand Change.
Everybody is scared, tired, run down, worn out.
A recent survey by Oracle Poll Research for CUPE, the union representing nurses, indicates almost half of over 2,000 nurses who participated said they were coping poorly.
The vast majority of these employees are women, and they're really stepping up during COVID. If they get sick, they're not necessarily paid. In fact, about 1/3 of them report they're not paid.
CUPE is also calling for last year's temporary $4 pay bump to be made permanent. In a statement, the Ministry of Health says the government remains committed to protecting public sector jobs. Bill 124 is designed to protect public sector jobs and vital frontline services. But the bill means a 1% increase in their salary. This NICU nurse says that's not enough, and the bill should be repealed.
We are ultimately advocating for is paid sick days, and not 3 days. We're advocating for at least 10 days because When you have to self-isolate for COVID exposure or having COVID, it's not 3 days.
30% of the workers surveyed considered leaving their jobs. Marini says she's overworked, and if things don't change, she'll consider retiring early.
The pandemic will end one day, but we have to be in a healthy place for nurses when this is all over as well.
As of Monday, for Nurses Week, black ribbons will be handed out to nurses, a symbol of those lost to COVID, and to raise awareness for the ongoing struggles in healthcare. Dahlia Ashry, CBC News, Toronto.
Turning next to some emerging medical data that's finding more people are suffering heart attacks during the pandemic. Natalie Collada spoke to a Toronto researcher about why it's happening and what you can do to save a life.
In a situation where every second counts, it's a disturbing trend.
We do know worldwide that rates of cardiac arrest during the COVID-19 pandemic are substantially increased around the world.
And it appears the same may be true in the GTA. Preliminary data shows cardiac arrests in Peel were up 19% in the first 3 months of the pandemic. Toronto researcher Katie Allen isn't surprised.
Part of what we think is happening is that people are scared of going to the hospital, of catching COVID. So they're staying at home for longer.
And that can make a big difference.
The chances of survival drops 10% with every minute. And so by 10 minutes, if you haven't done anything, the chances of survival are very close to zero. Recognizing that someone is having a cardiac arrest, calling 911 as soon as possible, and then performing CPR and going to get an AED. If somebody can do those things very quickly before EMS gets there, then the chances of survival can be as high as 70%.
I wasn't thinking about, okay, this is my next step. It's I need to get this guy up and breathing again. I need to save him.
At 17 years old, Rachel Gillis was able to save a man at her father's hockey game when he collapsed. She used CPR and a defibrillator to restart his heart.
Honestly, I think everyone needs to know how to do it.
Ontario students learn CPR in grade 9. In fact, it's mandatory, but with virtual learning, the concern is those skills may fall by the wayside. Statistics show only 4 in 10 people in Canada will stop to help someone experiencing cardiac arrest, and experts worry with the pandemic, those numbers may drop.
Now more than ever, I think it's really important for people to learn, how to recognize and how to help someone who's having an emergency, but also know, what steps they can take to keep themselves safe, because COVID is not going away.
That includes wearing a mask and administering chest compressions. Natalie Collada, CBC News, Toronto.
Now to a lovely display of support in Mississauga. Motorcyclists rallied outside the home of a boy orphaned after his mother died of COVID-19. Roughly 15 motorcyclists dropped off gifts for 13-year-old Mazin Kamal, offering messages of support on the first Mother's Day he's experiencing without his mother.
I always thought that when COVID started, I always thought that me and her would make it out. We'd be perfectly fine, and we'd come out and we'd live normal lives again. And I just want to say that she was really nice, and I miss my mom a lot.
Dahlia was not only my friend, she was like literally my soulmate.
We first brought you his story a few weeks ago. Mazin's mother, Dahlia Ali, died of COVID on April 17th. It had been just the two of them since his dad died of cancer when he was just 5 years old. Despite the difficult circumstances, Mazin says he is grateful for everyone's prayers, and he has plans to join his family in Italy. A quiet night tonight weather-wise as we look live at the Toronto skyline, and a beautiful shot it is. Sophia Kambalia joins us now with a look at your weather forecast.
Hi there, Chris. Hope everyone had a really great Mother's Day. I'm here at the waterfront in Burlington at Spencer Smith Park. A little chilly with a bit of a lake breeze. It was a below seasonal Mother's Day, but all in all, not so bad. It could have been much more wet. We just narrowly missed a big system stateside that could have meant much more of a rainy day for anybody here in the Golden Horseshoe. We had some decent sunshine. The clouds came out in the afternoon, and they will continue well into the overnight period. It will be cool and it will be clear. hovering just around the freezing mark. Yet again, a couple degrees above. Yet again, for the second night in a row, we have a frost advisory out for a wide swath of the GTA. Bring in any of those frost-sensitive plants or cover them if you can. When you wake up Monday morning to begin your work week, it's about 4 or 5 degrees, and we've got a spotty chance of showers for the next couple days. Here's why. There's this big upper level low, and it's going to mean more rain for eastern Ontario and for cottage country, but for us, we'll have little pockets of pop-up remnant moisture. You'll make it to 12 with clouds for your Monday afternoon. You'll barely struggle to get to double digits on Tuesday. And coming up in the long range, I'll tell you about when the warm-up will finally come and how there'll be more of a sunshine chance midweek. Chris.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Sophia. We're back in a moment. Dozens of people gathered today at Celebration Square in Mississauga to protest the threatened eviction of Palestinian families from a neighborhood that's being claimed by Jewish settlers in East Jerusalem. Some of the people attending spoke about how they feel seeing the violence unfold, especially during the holy month of Ramadan.
So we're just standing in solidarity with all our friends and family and everybody that we love back there to show that this shouldn't be happening to Palestinians in these years and to have our land back.
Ramadan is supposed to be a month of peace, doing good for others, focusing on ourselves, you know, just being peaceful overall. And having that happen to our brothers and sisters in Palestine is just so sad and very unexpected. Families losing their houses in such a holy month. It's just very heartbreaking.
In East Jerusalem, the evictions sparked protests over the weekend that ended in violent clashes with Israeli security forces. Meanwhile, the court hearing on the evictions has been deferred, possibly for another month. This gives the Israeli government time to try to defuse that situation. Now to a story of a Canadian woman who went to university here in Toronto and is now trying to make a big impact on the world stage. Later this year, the United Nations will pick its Secretary General. It's widely expected Antonio Guterres will be selected for a second term, but that's not stopping Aurora Akancha. Stephen D'Souza sat down with her in New York.
I know I'm right. I absolutely...
Aurora Akancha says she's ready to lead the United Nations, and she thinks the time for change is now.
I think this election offers us a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to change direction and move the UN from talking to actually doing.
I am no longer waiting for the torch to be passed down. I am taking it.
She was born in India, grew up in Saudi Arabia, and lived and went to university in Canada. She was recruited to work at the UN by the very man she's trying to unseat, current Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He needed auditors to help address waste in the organization. She says she found that for every dollar spent, only about 30 cents went to frontline causes, in an agency mired in apathy.
No one was challenging status quo, current way of doing things, and I was like, who are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? So that definitely for me was a trigger that everyone is aware, no one is doing anything.
Secretary General elections used to be so secretive they were compared to papal conclaves. The UN has promised to make the process more transparent, but still, Guterres is listed as the only official candidate.
I think her candidacy is striking a chord.
Longtime UN watcher Richard Gowan says Akancha's lack of diplomatic experience hurts her, but her campaign is making an impact.
Aurora is doing the UN a service because even if she doesn't get the top job, and let's be honest, she won't, she is focusing attention on wastefulness in the system and the need for better budgeting.
Aurora's candidacy needs the support of at least one country. She's met with the Canadian mission, but so far, no formal endorsement. She knows she's an outsider, but she's determined.
What I bring to the table is leadership, vision, and consciousness to realize that we have to put the needs of people above anything else.
But for an organization known to move at a glacial pace, that likely won't be enough this time around. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, New York.
It's not as celebratory as, it would have normally been, but I do still feel special. It's nice to come out and...
Might not have felt that celebratory, but it certainly was a nice day weather-wise for all the families out there celebrating Mother's Day. Of course, it had to be very different than usual. We'll have more on how folks are honoring their moms coming up next. Happy Mother's Day to my mom and all the moms out there. And sadly, it is the second time we are celebrating Mother's Day like this during the pandemic. And while we can't get together to give our moms hugs, oh boy, wouldn't we like to do that right about now? Here is how some people celebrated the holiday at High Park today.
We moved a whole bunch of chairs into our front parking pad so we could all sit safely outside.
So it's not as celebratory as, it would have normally been, but I do still feel special. It's nice to come out in the park and, see other people enjoying themselves.
It's totally different because always we spend that holiday with family.
Spring, of course, in full swing, and people were out enjoying the park with their families, getting some exercise and taking in that fresh air. And here's a live look at Niagara Falls tonight. The day started off pretty well, a little warmer, but it's really cooled off, sitting now around 7 degrees. Sophia Kambalia is back with your weather forecast for the rest of the week. Sophia.
Well, Chris, I have cracked back out the winter jacket. Actually, I never really put it away. It's these cool, clear nights that we're still a little worried about the hard freezes, right? Especially for many of the orchards that blossomed so early this year, or for people like me that didn't take their own advice and have already been gardening and planting things in the ground. For the overnight period tonight, we'll be hovering just above the freezing mark. Yet again, there are frost advisories back in place for many of you in the GTA. We just missed a big rainy system to the south. Those of you in Windsor and London and Chatham did get the rain, and there is another system over the next couple days that will be hovering sort of to our north. Those of you in the GTA will be in the crosshairs, so an unsettled pattern will ensue over the next couple days. Monday, low double digits, and that chance for showers. Same thing for Tuesday, except you'll barely struggle to get to the double digits. That's about 7 degrees below seasonal for this time of year. We are back up to the mid-teens, though, on Wednesday with more of that sunshine chance. And then have a look at the trend for the rest of the week. We are on the up and up, folks. There is some rain as we head into the weekend, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. Spring this year just came on so early and so warm, and now it seems like it's sort of stuttering. So a lot of people are, it's rubbing salt in the wounds. But it could be worse. We all could be shoveling, right? Chris, back to you.
It certainly could be worse. Thanks, Sophia, and happy Mother's Day to you. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we let you go, though, I want to show you this. We'll leave you with some shots of Ontario Place tonight, just beside the Martin Goodman Bike Trail, where you can have a look at an outdoor photo exhibit. This one is called On the Fence, and it features 4 photographers from the West Toronto Photography Group. The exhibit will be up until the end of the month. Have a great night, everybody, and a good start to your week.